Before we begin this unsettling tale, let me provide some context about Japanese culture that will help you understand this story better. In Japan, it's common for young people to live alone in small apartments after graduating high school, even while working entry-level jobs. Family relationships remain very close, with frequent visits to the family home being normal. Japanese work culture is notoriously demanding, with employees often working extremely long hours, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. The concept of karoshi, death from overwork, reflects how intense Japanese work environments can be. Additionally, arranged meetings through mutual friends for potential romantic partners, called amiai, are still a traditional way couples meet in Japan. Mental health issues, while increasingly acknowledged, still carry significant stigma in Japanese society. Now, let's begin our story. A few years ago, I realized I was married. This phrase, "I realized," isn't a joke or exaggeration. I truly discovered that I was married, as if waking up from a dream. At that time, I was 21 years old and working at a company. After graduating high school, I got a job at a small local business. I was living alone in a small apartment, leading a simple life. Then, one day, something happened that changed everything. I returned to my family home for a visit, as I often did. But when I walked inside, there was a woman I had never seen before, sitting in our living room. "Who is she?" "She's beautiful." That was my first thought. I asked my father, "Who is this person?" My father looked extremely surprised and said, "What are you talking about?" Then, the woman smiled at me and said, "Welcome home, David." I was shocked. How did she know my name? When I asked her this question, she laughed and replied, "What do you mean? I'm your wife, aren't I?" What was this woman talking about? At first I thought it was some kind of prank. I looked around the house carefully. At that time I didn't even have a girlfriend, let alone a wife. I was living alone in the apartment, so even if I were married, there shouldn't be anyone at my family home. But my parents and this woman were acting completely natural, as if they were genuinely family. I stood there frozen, staring at the scene in bewilderment. The woman was chatting with my mother while watching TV, and serving tea to my father as if they had known each other for years. In fact, she looked at me strangely for standing there so long and asked, "Aren't you going to sit down?" That snapped me back to reality, and I became extremely agitated. Who is this woman? Why is she in my family home? What do you mean, wife? I fired these questions rapidly at everyone, but my parents and the woman just looked puzzled. My parents, who had been smiling at first, began to sense something was seriously wrong when they saw how upset I was becoming. They held me down and kept saying, calm down, calm down." The woman joined in, repeatedly saying, "Don't you recognize me? Don't you remember me?" Let me say this again. I had never been married. I had no memory of marriage whatsoever. From high school graduation until that moment, I had been living alone and working, occasionally visiting my family home. Sometimes I went drinking with friends, but I had never even been on a date with a woman. Yet my parents and this woman were insisting that she was my wife. It made no sense to me. I questioned my own memory, but I still didn't know this woman at all. When I looked at my parents again, they were definitely my real parents. After I calmed down somewhat, we sat down to talk. My father asked me again, "Don't you remember Anna?" I firmly replied, "I don't even know who she is, let alone remember her." Then Anna began to cry. My mother started crying too. My father had a very troubled expression on his face. I felt like I was the only bad person in the room. After thinking for a while, my father went to the back of the house and brought out a photo album. When he showed it to me, I saw pictures of myself inside, and next to me in the photos was Anna. They appeared to be travel photos, but I had never been to the places shown in the pictures. I thought, what is this? As I turned the pages, and then I found wedding photos. I want to emphasize again, I truly have no memory of getting married. Yet in those photographs, I was married to Anna. My father explained the situation to me. About a year ago, I had apparently brought Anna to the house. I had announced that we were getting married. According to him, I got married a year before that day. However, because I was extremely busy with work at that time, Anna was going to stay at my family home for a while. Apparently, I had bowed my head and asked my parents for this favor. Anna also tearfully told me her story. She said a mutual friend from work had introduced her to me. We went out to eat together, started dating and got married. Her parents had passed away, and when I proposed, I said, "I will be your family for life." Both my father and Anna repeatedly asked me, "Do you really not remember any of this?" But I truly had no recollection whatsoever. A year ago, my work had indeed been incredibly demanding. I had been put in charge of a major company project and was working almost non-stop, pulling all-nighters constantly. But precisely because of that, there was no way I could have gotten married during such a busy period. However, the wedding photos showed my workplace supervisors and colleagues, as well as my local friends. For a prank, the photos were too well crafted and the setup too elaborate. Most importantly, my serious-minded father could never have pulled off such realistic acting. I suddenly became frightened. My parents didn't seem like my parents anymore, and I didn't feel like myself anymore. I rushed out of the family home and returned to my apartment. But since my parents knew where I lived, I packed minimal belongings and fled to a nearby business hotel. My phone kept ringing constantly during this time. I desperately tried to organize my thoughts, but I still had no memory of getting married. So I decided to verify the situation. I called a local friend and asked, "Am I married?" He immediately replied, "What kind of stupid question is that? Of course you are." Next, I called a close colleague from work. When I asked the same question, I got a similar response. Everyone else knew that I was married, except me. There were even photographs as evidence. From everyone else's perspective, it seemed like I had developed amnesia, but I didn't feel like I had amnesia. All my other memories remained vivid, and I remembered everything from before and after the supposed marriage period. It was as if only the fact of marriage and Anna herself had been completely erased from my mind. After thinking about it extensively, I returned to my family home the next morning. I spoke with my parents and Anna once again. The result was the same. I still couldn't remember anything, but based on the photographs and other people's accounts, it became clear that I had genuinely forgotten everything. Anna told me something else. In the beginning, I had constantly called the family home and come to visit her, but a few months ago, I suddenly stopped coming to the house and stopped contacting her phone. I still called the family home, so she assumed I was just busy with work and endured the situation patiently. After I left the family home, my father did some research and suggested that I might have dissociative disorder, a mental illness. Apparently, it can cause partial memory loss. They recommended I go to a hospital, but I felt completely healthy and had no desire to visit a psychiatric facility. I told Anna the following: "I'm sorry, but I don't remember you at all. It would only be painful for you to stay with someone like me. I think you should divorce me and find someone else." But Anna refused and insisted she wanted to stay with me. She also said she would stop living at my family home and move into my apartment. I didn't want to live with a woman I didn't know, but if I truly had just lost my memory, then perhaps my reluctance was just selfishness on my part. So Anna and I began living together. She was 1 year older than me. She knew my favorite foods, and she seemed to know all my habits and hobbies perfectly. At first, our daily life was very tense. After all, I was suddenly living with a complete stranger. Even though everyone called this woman my wife, I couldn't fully accept the situation. I dreaded coming home every day. But I think Anna's situation was mentally difficult too. She would look at me and try to talk, but when she mentioned things I didn't understand, she would look devastated and apologize, saying, I'm sorry." From Anna's perspective, it must have been hell. She was newlywed and had been staying at my family home for a long time. Finally, she could live with me, but now I was treating her like a stranger, Feeling guilty, I suggested divorce several times, but each time Anna would cry and refuse. When she served me meals that she claimed were my favorite dishes that she was good at making, they tasted completely unfamiliar to me. When she took me to places she said we had visited together, I had never seen them before. Physical intimacy was completely impossible. I felt uncomfortable with the idea of being with a woman I didn't know at all. I couldn't bring myself to touch her. Several times she said, "You don't have to hold back," but I still couldn't do it. It felt like I would be forcing myself on a stranger, and the guilt was overwhelming. I thought maybe I could treat it like visiting a prostitute, but even that was impossible. This situation continued for a while. After living together for some time, Anna and I began talking much more. Anna also cried less frequently and started smiling every day. Sometimes she looked sad, but her smiles increased even more. The memories Anna had of me were completely different from the memories I was creating with Anna now. But Anna said she was fine with that. She said that if everything from before was gone, we could just create new memories from the beginning. I was grateful to Anna for saying this, and I wanted to make her happy, so I proposed to Anna. Of course, from Anna's perspective, this was the second proposal, and legally, Anna and I were already husband and wife, so it was a strange situation. But as a way of marking a new beginning, I bought a ring and proposed to her properly. Anna was very surprised at first, but she immediately started crying and said, "Please take care of me," as she put on the ring. At that moment, I finally felt like Anna and I had become a real married couple. Anna still has both rings. One is the ring that the previous me gave her. The other is the ring that the current me gave her. She keeps both rings carefully stored away, saying they are both treasures for life. And that brings us to the present. Now Anna and I get along very well, and we've become the kind of couple that others envy. I'm glad Anna is my wife, and I want to continue being married to her. But something strange occurred to me. While Anna had her wedding ring, my ring was nowhere to be found in the house. Moreover, there wasn't a single photograph of Anna anywhere in my apartment. In other words, there were no traces of Anna at all in the apartment where I had been living. For newlyweds, isn't that strange? Also, fundamentally, why don't I remember anything about Anna? I researched dissociative disorder on my own, and apparently it often occurs when stress bursts due to some trigger. So if I did develop dissociative disorder, what was that trigger? What could have been significant enough to make me forget every single memory of Anna? I don't know the answer, and now I think it doesn't matter. In fact, I've started to think that maybe it's better if I never remember. At first I felt fear and anxiety about not remembering anything about Anna, but now I'm beginning to think that remembering might be more frightening. Memories we don't want to remember might have good reasons for being forgotten, but instead I was able to create new memories. Perhaps that was a second chance given to me by fate. Tell me, do you think memories are truly reliable?